Who would like to introduce themselves?
Me, I'm back. Margie Eaton, I'm running for Supervisor of Elections in Lake County 2016.
Very good.
Hello, I'm currently a candidate for Congressional District 5, but that may change here tomorrow.
Is Jennifer Sullivan here? Oh, she's in Dallas.
My name is Peter Tarvey. I'm a Umatilla City Council.
Welcome, Peter. Very good. Also, there's some candidate petitions there on the back table. If you haven't filled out a petition for a candidate, we'd ask that you please do that if you're so inclined. And I believe that's it for me. I'm going to turn this over to Walter Price. He is our moderator for tonight. And please welcome Walter Price.
Get my eyes on here. Good evening. My name is Walter Price, and I will be your moderator this evening. Please join me in thanking the North Lake Tea Party and the Lake Federated Republican Women's Club for putting together this program tonight. We're pleased that you could join us this evening to learn more about the penny sales tax. You may or may not have heard about this initiative. Some have been fighting for it and some against it. Whatever side you are on, we welcome you. Now, just for kicks, I would like to see if our panelists tonight are going to be persuasive. So I'd like to get a feel for the room now and afterwards. If you presently feel like you are for a penny sales tax, raise your hand. And if you presently feel like you're against it, raise your hand. It looks fairly evenly split. All right, well, we'll see how that changes by the end of the evening. Undecided?
Undecided.
Well, I'm assuming everybody else is undecided. Our goal this evening is to share with you information from both sides of the issue by asking our guest speakers to address a series of questions as well as answer direct audience questions. So we will have a chance for you to do that. Let me briefly tell you what the ordinance is. The purpose of this ordinance is to extend the 1 cent infrastructure sales tax for an additional 15 years. The sales tax is currently set to expire December 31st, 2017. If extended, the sales tax will be divided between the Lake County School Board, the municipalities, and the county. The county's share will further be allocated based upon quality of life needs, public works needs, public safety needs, and public facility needs. If approved, the sales tax shall be extended from January 1st, 2018 until December 31st, 2032. That's the actual ordinance that you'll see on the ballot in November. You may well leave tonight with unanswered questions, but hopefully you will have learned enough about the penny sales tax to make an informed vote in the special election held on November 3rd. Now, let me briefly tell you about our panelists tonight. Commissioner Sullivan began his first term on the County Commission in November of 2012. He previously served as a city commissioner and mayor of Fruitland Park from 1983 to 1990 and as a Lake County School Board member from 1990 to 1992. He also was on the board of directors of the Central Florida Health Alliance for 12 years and retired in 2009 as Brigadier General from the Florida Army National Guard, completing a total of 33 years of military service. Bill Mathias is a resident of Okahonka. Bill was first elected in 2012 and again in 2014 to the Lake County School Board District 1. Bill was educated in the public school system in Jacksonville, Florida. Upon graduation from high school in 1972, he enlisted in the U.S. Army Military Police Corps. Notice I didn't say corpsman, like, you know. Honorably discharged in 1976, Bill unitized the benefits of the GI Bill and returned to college. In 1981, he received his Bachelor in Business Administration. In 1982, he moved to Lake County and founded Mathias Food Service Equipment Company located in Leesburg, Florida. In 2001, he returned to college and in 2003 received with honors his master's degree in organizational management. Based on a successful business career, he brings a unique perspective to a diverse board. Bill is a member of the Catholic community of St. Paul's, American Legion, Post 101, 4th degree Knights of Columbus, member of the Leesburg and South Lake Chamber of Commerce, and member of the Leesburg Partnership. Bill serves as school board liaison to the Chamber Alliance, Audit, Wellness, Sports, Health Science, Collegiate Academy, and Sales Tax Committee. Alternate to the CFACC, League of Cities, Value Added Board, Lake Sumter MPO Communities. Okay. Don Magruder. For more than a decade, Don Magruder has been the chairman of Citizens for Better Government, LLC, a group that promotes economic growth by advocating for fewer government regulations and lower taxes. For 35 years, Don has worked in the building supply industry, and he has become a leading voice representing the construction industry as a two-term president of the Southeast Mississippi Home Builders Association, two-term associate vice president for Home Builders Association of Lake and Sumter County, and chairman of the board for the Florida Building Material Association. Don is the CEO of Romac Lumber and Supply Incorporated, where he has worked for the last 18 years, and he writes a weekly column for the Daily Commercial on home improvements and a monthly national column for Pro Sales Magazine on executive leadership. Don is married to his wife, Darlene, for almost 36 years, and they have two daughters, Sarah, who is a hospice nurse, and Anna, who is a second grade teacher at Cayley Elementary in Orlando. And last but not least is our own Vance. Vance Jochim is speaking against the renewal of the Lake County penny sales tax, which is on the November 2015 ballot. And then he's got on here, please vote no on the tax. Vance is a retired internal audit manager who worked at several California large organizations, including Nissan Motor Corp, Arco, the oil company, which is now part of BP, a concrete materials company now part of CEMEX, a software company, and the County of Los Angeles. He also was a U.S. federal contractor helping set up an Iraqi anti-corruption agency in Baghdad in 2004 and 2006 before moving to Lake County from Orange County, California, to escape the California liberals. Vance was a certified internal auditor, a certified information systems auditor, a certified fraud examiner, and also has an MBA from Pepperdine University based in Malibu, California. He specialized in directing operational or performance auditing, leading to million-dollar improvements in budgets or profits. Vance founded and runs the local Lake County watchdog blog, FiscalRangers.com, and has attended Lake County School Board meetings over the last 8 years, and also board meetings of the Lake County Board of Commissioners. The focus of FiscalRangers.com is to describe fiscal issues and fiscal fiascos resulting from local government operations and recommend process changes to reduce repetition of the fiascos. Vance will explain why voters should vote no on the sales tax renewal issue until certain conditions are implemented. Okay, now that's our panel. Quite an impressive group, I might add. Okay, my role as the moderator tonight is to keep the program flowing, ask the prepared questions, enforce the time limits, allow for rebuttal if needed, and most importantly, keep my opinions to myself. So as the program unfolds, please provide your full attention to our guest speakers. Our timekeeper, Carol Knighton, has been directed to raise a paddle with 30 seconds remaining and a paddle when time expires. Each speaker has agreed to keep these specific time limits. Now here's the format. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes for opening remarks. 10 questions were prepared in advance and will be asked, allowing each speaker 1 minute to answer. Now we're doing short times because we want to get through as much as we can. Although some of the questions are directed at a particular individual, each panelist will be asked the same questions. Each speaker will be given an additional 30 seconds for rebuttal if necessary. At the end of the formal questions, the audience will be allowed to ask questions from the floor. A microphone will be made available, and those interested will be asked to form a line to expedite the process. We ask that only questions be asked and avoid making statements, as we desire to address as many questions as possible. After the formal questions and the audience questions, each speaker will be given 2 minutes for closing comments. All right. So, with that, I guess we'll start on the end down there. And Tim, if you would like to go ahead and give us your 2-minute opening statement.
2 whole minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
There's a mic right there.
okay. I'm used to talking to soldiers, so I could just stand up and shout it out. First of all, let me thank the North Lake Tea Party and the Federated Women's Club for putting this forum together, because I believe that an educated electorate is the most important thing that we can do as we move forward. The renewal of the penny sales tax is an important part of how the Board of County Commissioners meets its statutory obligations. It is shared by those who use our infrastructure, roads, parks, libraries, public safety proposals, and 30% of that tax comes from other than residents here in Lake County who use those same facilities. While at the same time, it does help us keep ad valorem taxes lower, because 70% of the ad valorem taxes that come in from Lake County come on the backs of homeowners. So it is closest thing to what I would consider a fair tax that we have at our use as a Board of County Commissioners, and I think it's incumbent on us as the Board of County Commissioners to find a balance between meeting the existing needs of our residents and looking at future projects.
Good evening. Good evening, I'm Bill Mathias. The first thing I'd like to point out is I left some cards in the back because we're going to go over a lot tonight, but not nearly as much as you need to know. So in the back, it directs you to a website, and it will send you to all of the projects we have completed. It gives you a very specific list of what our proposed projects are. So I think the most important thing for the school board, and most important as I look at things as a taxpayer, is are we being transparent? Is there a return on that investment? And what is that investment? If you go through and look, you'll see schools that date back to 1954 that need to be refreshed. That we have one at 1927. So here's the list that you'll find and how much we've allocated for each of those for resources. How important is the tax? It is our only source of income, the school district, outside of impact fees that pay for growth that we have to draw on. If you believe that economic development depends on an educated workforce, you cannot vote against this tax. If you believe that all of our students across this county deserve a safe, secure, and also one that is competitive from technology and infrastructure, then you have to vote for this tax. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me tonight. Thank the Tea Party folks. Now, I just want to make one point about this crowd. I suspect most people in this crowd distrust everything that government says. I want to make one point. I'm a private citizen, and they're the government. So keep that in mind as you listen to that table and this table. First off, I'm opposed, and people like me are not opposed, are opposed to the penny sales tax, not because we're trying to eliminate the penny sales tax. We agree that broad-based funding is absolutely necessary, but there's some fundamental things we do not agree with. Number one, look at the stock market, what happened today. Lost 2%. Most people think there's a worldwide recession at hand. I honestly believe we could go back to 2009 just like that. If we do not force the politicians to limit where this money is utilized. In a couple of years, they're going to come back to you and me looking for another 13.8% increase in taxes. The other thing that concerns me, the Republican Party's been accused by Democrats for suppression of vote. They scheduled this vote in November so that the uneducated voter, as they say, would not come out and vote. Now, I'm a simple man, but an uneducated man that knows better not to vote for a bad tax, I think he's pretty smart. So I don't like the way they're doing it. We're spending $400,000. We could have had the vote for free in March of next year, August of next year, and November. They're going to tell you, oh, for budget reasons, we had to have it sooner. No, they don't want the great unwashed to come out and vote. And that's not right. That's not the American way. The tax needs to be defined in the major priorities that they've said for the last 15 years. We'll get to it later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've been going to these meetings for like 8 years. I understand probably more about why they need all this spending than most people. And I agree that there are a lot of expenses that need to be continued. The cities are kind of caught in this argument that we're having because they depend on it for water projects, and they don't get a whole lot because it's split. They're 1/3 of the total $450 million being collected goes to the cities, but they have to split it among 14 of them. So I'm mostly going to talk about the school board and the county board. What I've always seen in my work as an internal auditor is that there are people that negotiate things and do not get trade-offs or conditions. I mean, think Obama and the Iran deal. I mean, he just basically gave up the farm. And here, this proposal, or this referendum, there are no restrictions on how they spend the money. I used to talk about the North Lake County Hospital District. They didn't have restrictions before the change in the laws, and they could spend the money on pink flamingos for their lawn. And that's the situation that the wording here allows. And frankly, I don't trust some of the elected officials, especially at the county board, excluding the one that's here, for two. Oh yeah, there's two over here. He's turning red. Yeah, two of them. I don't trust three of them who aren't here in choosing projects that should be a priority. I mean, there's a lot of effort to say, oh, we need to have this for roads. Well, they took away the money from the general fund to be allocated to roads. There's a CFAC committee, a finance committee meeting that we'll talk about later, but they recommended take money out of the general fund and they never did.
Okay, we'll start with the first formal question. Now, some of these questions are really kind of directed towards, one or the other panelists, but I want all the panelists to be able to respond. So question number one is, if the penny sales tax is not renewed, will the school board raise funds elsewhere to make up the difference? Where would the new funds come from? Or will the school board cut spending? So start with Tim again.
Oh, Tim's answer on the school board?
Yeah, because I want everybody to just throw in their 2 cents worth.
I think that's a school board question because I get the next one, so I'll
Right.
just pass it to Bill in the interest of time.
Go ahead, Bill.
Here's what it would mean. In 2017, we still have $200 million worth of debt. And so the service to debt is being right now allocated from the 1.5 mil, and it will cover it. But it will cover it. The additional revenue that comes from the 1 cent builds in for the infrastructure we're going to be talking about. If we don't have those funds, then capital projects come to a stop. Everything that you see on the list comes to an end.
And Don or Vance, go ahead and respond if you want.
Well, once again, I'm not opposed to the tax, not opposed to the 3rd cent going to the school. But quite frankly, the reason why they have $200 million or $438 million in debt is because they ill-managed the last 1 cent tax and ill-managed a lot of funds in the early 2000s. I think the provisions that we need to have and make them go back to the drawing board and produce a new ordinance is that there's restrictions to make sure that the penny sales tax, their portion, goes to new student stations, because that's what they've said they've needed for the last 15 years. Put it on that. And then the other thing, I don't think the money should be bonded out. Quite frankly, we should be paying as we're going. You know, if you look at the debt structure, realistically, they could be buying a school every year with the debt that they're paying. So once again, it's not that we're opposed to the schools, but we're opposed to giving a blank check away. We offer reasonable conclusions. Anytime the government has an opportunity to sneak in a referendum trying to...
Time.
Thank you very much.
You won that one.
Vance, any comment on that?
I did. I gave you 30. Watch this. This means 30 seconds.
You know, I didn't even see you. You're a sweet woman.
Vance, do you want to make a comment or move on?
Yes, please. I agree with the bonds. That's one of my major points, is the bonding, the spending, because there's already a plan for a feeding frenzy. As soon as this gets approved, the city of Tavares has already got on their proposed budget for 2 years from now. All of a sudden there's a huge expense. It's because they're going to bond out and buy a new fancy building. And the city of Eustis, same thing. And the county, I just can guarantee you that they're going to. And the schools, that's what happened to them this time, is that they bonded out and they got all those bonds in the first part of the year. It says 30 seconds, okay. And they got all those bonds and they're paying huge amounts of interest. And then they ran out of money in the last few years because we had the downturn, and they were always complaining about the debt payments eating up what money they had available. And so I think no bonds, and there ought to be something ironclad that all these parties agree that they are not going to sell bonds. They're going to live within their means just like most of us do. Except Ralph, he buys tires on credit.
Okay, so question number 2 is pretty much directed towards Tim, but again, anybody can have a comment on it if they want. And it's basically the same question. If the penny sales tax is not renewed, will a board of county commissioners raise funds elsewhere to make up the difference? Where would the new funds come from? Or will the board of county commissioners cut spending?
If not renewed, the money needed for essential capital needs would have to come from somewhere. An example of that would be public safety vehicles. Our ambulances spend 1 million miles a year on the road, and so we have to turn those over effectively. The only other options that we have are ad valorem taxes, which I think is the worst place to go to try to meet those needs. So this is a tax that I would hope we would never have to raise taxes because of this, but it is my opinion that the only way to fund this adequately and spread in a fair manner is fund it with the penny sales tax.
Since that's your question, I'm going to carry one thought. Our school board has a pay-as-you-go strategy. That the sins of the past you can't repeat. And there's a great example, and you're absolutely right, $32 million a year. It was spent wisely, but it was spent up front. They bonded it to make things happen immediately, and they did. So then you're caught on the tail end with just debt. The reality is that at a time when we were in premier growth, this consultant said we needed 14,000 per home. We received 93.24, that's 64%. You can't buy a pencil for $1 and sell it for 64 cents and then think you're not going to get debt. We need to fully fund growth, fully fund new growth, and then we need to pay as you go. And that's the strategy of your current board.
Well, the politicians are telling you just like Greece is doom and gloom, and they're also telling you that you're not paying enough taxes. And they're telling people who build a house you're not paying enough to buy a house. Let's be honest with you, the ambulance, for example, property taxes were initially set up in most communities to pay for fire, police, and ambulance, and those type of things. You pay an assessment on your ambulances. You also pay a fire assessment. When a new house is constructed or a new business is constructed, you pay another fire fee. If all the money that's allocated to the various things went to those appropriate emergency vehicles and stuff, they would be gold-plated. The problem is the politicians divert it to other areas. Just don't buy what they're selling. Once again, if we don't restrict this tax now, if the economy collapses, we're going to have serious issues.
This question is about the county, right? Okay. The county has done things. I sat at budget proposal meetings where they took $1 million of capital budgeted expense from the EMS side and it said, well, we're going to transfer this over so it will be funded through the penny sales tax. What they're doing is they're taking emotional argument issues and putting them in there on that list and saying this is why we need it, whereas that was budgeted for and people are paying a separate tax for EMS and those ambulances, and that should be handled that way. Now, as far as the other thing that I've seen in the budget hearings is that there's a massive amount of spending being planned for parks, okay? And yet roads is the reason that roads they're not funding a lot. I mean, they actually aren't paying anything out of general fund, very little. And they have reduced the amount of going to roads out of the penny tax, because I've been at meetings like that. And so they need to really spend more on roads, and that should be one of the defined expenses.
Okay, again, this question is sort of directed towards the school board, but again, anybody can join in if they want to make a comment about it. With all the Leesburg grade schools being Title I schools, what impact will a vote down have on meeting the needs of the children? Tim, do you want to comment or pass it on to Bill?
I'll pass it to
Okay.
Bill.
That one's a bit of an apples and orange, and you can, if the penny sales tax isn't affected, Title I funding is supplemental to existing funding, and it's programmatic. So it's not capital. What we're speaking about with the 1 cent is capital, not for our students, not funding for our students. That's federal and state dollars. So quite honestly, there is no impact to our Title I students should this not be renewed.
He's absolutely right, because Leesburg doesn't have an overcrowding situation just like most of North Lake County. And in fact, the problem is they put the wrong student stations in the wrong schools and are having issues with it. Anybody in this room believes that funding equals better schools? The Lake County School District has fundamental issues. And it's just a Trojan horse for them to say that this penny sales tax is the be-all, end-all. If that were the truth, why don't we have great schools today? I first know they're in a very difficult situation, and don't misunderstand, we support the penny sales tax, but with restrictions, because as well as little Johnny's got to learn to read, their mama and daddy needs a job, and that's just as important.
I'm aware of Leesburg schools also because I followed the issue of them being F, and then they dropped, 2 of the charter schools disappeared or dropped out recently. They are working on a program to improve that. From a funding standpoint, this issue, this tax is for capital spending, and unless they have a high degree of need for renovations, and they probably do need computers, this won't really affect them a lot.
Okay. Now this really could apply to anybody up there, so we'll go ahead and start with Tim and then come back down. Is it in the plan to use the sales tax funds to create new debt?
At the Lake County Board of County Commissioners, there is no plan to use the sales tax to create new debt. And let me say that again. At the Lake County Board of County Commissioners, there is no plan to use sales tax to create new debt.
The stability of one's home, every one of our homes, depends on how fiscally responsible we are. Those that are in trouble, typically, it's because they get into credit card debt. And that was what I saw when I came on the board 3 years ago. We have reduced debt in our Lake County schools $22 million in 3 years. We will continue to pay down debt, and we will pay as you go. That is the spirit of this board. Now, does that mean you never have debt? No. If it is in the best interest of you, you're borrowing cheap, the building materials, you buy them cheap, that one may make some sense, but you will never see the $600 million kind of borrowing that was done in the past trying to play catch up.
Well, first off, if you believe a politician won't get something in debt, then you're in the wrong group probably. No disrespect, I love my colleagues, but they're one vote and there's 4 other people on these boards, and they're going to vote whatever they want. The thing that concerns me is the way this is written. I think it violates state law. The last line says other public infrastructure, and the opinion written by the Attorney General against the city of Flagler County, vague statements on the ballot measure were thrown out. I honestly think they're doing a disservice to the people of Lake County by not being more specific on the ballot, and I call on both Bill Mathias and Commissioner Sullivan to ask for Attorney General's opinion on this, because I think the Attorney General would throw it out.
As a very experienced internal auditor who's audited contracts up to $600 million in value in oil refinery modification contracts, it's what's in the writing, and there's nothing in writing. And so Don is correct, you know, we have 2 of the most well-spoken people here, the representatives, but the ones I don't trust aren't here. And they could just decide that, well, they're going to get donations to their campaign, or they want to go to a nice fundraising dinner or something like that, and they're going to vote for that, and they're going to vote for bonds. And I don't trust them until I see something in writing that prohibits this entirely. And to me, that would be a phrase or within the wording in the referendum. And since it's not in this one, that's a reason to vote it down and put it on the next one with that wording to prohibit bonds. And yeah, until there's a written policy, just saying, well, that's our thought pattern or something like that, to me is not worthy of even thinking about. Thanks.
Can I just rebut that everything that we do in ordinances is controlled by state law, and the way these ordinances are written, the way the referendum and the ballot language that you see is all in stead with what the state law requires as we move forward. So I think we're doing it to the best of our ability to make sure that we conform to the laws of the state of Florida.
Okay. Somebody? Sure.
We've actually had a couple of lawyers look at the ballot measure, and it's going to take an elected official to ask for an Attorney General's opinion. So, Commissioner Sullivan, while you trust your local counsel, the county attorney, I would encourage you to ask the Attorney General Bondi for an opinion and see if it meets the muster. And you may be right, but the way several other lawyers read it, quite frankly, it's a vague statement, it's poorly written, and it could open the county to a suit if it's passed it.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. And this sort of gets into that definition in there. The summary of the proposed ordinance states that the county's share will be further allocated based upon quality of life needs. What exactly are quality of life needs?
Pink flamingos.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen any pink flamingos in the county, but quality of life needs are efficient public safety systems such as police, fire, and emergency services that arrive on the spot in a timely manner. It's transportation infrastructure that meets the needs of our citizens. Finally, it's about parks, recreations, and trails which support a healthy lifestyle and which also promote economic diversity. And let me tell you, one of the things we're trying to do in the county is grow economically. And what we find is there are 3 criteria for a business to come that the top 3 criteria they look at to come to a location is workforce education, transportation, and quality of life. So all 3 things that the penny sales tax supports.
Since this is his question, then I'm going to move on to something I think is even more important. It's about trust. And when we speak about there are 3 people that aren't in here that I don't trust, or you got 4 other people that aren't in the room, and so you can't speak for them. Y'all elected them. This is a 15-year tax. It isn't tied to any one person. You know what I'm saying? So it has to be based on, you have to be engaged. You have to listen to these meetings. And I know they're really boring because I sit through them. But the truth is that hold us accountable. If you want something, you make a phone call. Mr. Krakowski's at every meeting, and he sends sometimes scathing emails to me. One a couple days ago. And Ralph Smith is not hesitant to reach out. That's where you're engaged. You have to trust. There has to be trust. And if we speak about those that represent us, that we don't trust them, or it's just a shame is all I'm going to say about that.
Well, I do believe trust is a big thing, and quite frankly, I don't trust Lake County government because of what I've seen. And as far as creating a business environment, I'm in business. You're looking at a man who survived the worst industry in the worst part of America, and we went from 505 people to 126, but we survived and we thrived. So there's nobody who's taking a harder lick during these times, and we're rebounding ourselves and doing okay now. But the business environment has nothing to do with the penny sales tax. And as far as the other folks that are concerned, I don't trust them. And if you pass this penny sales tax as written, you're giving a blank check to people that you may not trust. And that's what it's about, holding people accountable so that they will spend the money on priorities instead of non-priority items.
Again, as a person who has audited contracts, many large ones and many small ones, when I see vague terms, I get very worried. And when you have things like quality of life, then I'm thinking that they're playing a game like this, where you hit this and you get different, every time somebody turns around, they give you a different answer. And I question whether that term should be in there, and it should be specific, because already I personally think they have too many parks. And each of those, and they've got a whole mess of them in the budget that they've talked about and that they're putting in this list. And 15 years ago, they did another list like that, which there was an audit that disclosed that a lot of the items that were emotional and got people excited were never done. And so this year, and I was at the meeting where the county board discussed it, is said, well, we don't want to be caught in that again. So that's partly why they won't get any, they won't be specific about the number of projects. In other words, they aren't saying 50% goes to roads, etc. And that's where it is.
Remember this.
Okay, the next question really can apply to all 4 of you, because it's an opinion question. In last year's audit of the infrastructure sales tax, the Inspector General recorded a $900,000 modular building for a community center in Umatilla. Do you agree that the Sales Surtax Advisory Committee should have more authority in deciding how funds are used and if costs are reasonable?
Well, actually, we didn't build that, and that would be a Umatilla cost. But the fact of the matter is, community centers were part of the program. Actually, other dollars were used to fund some of those, and they came in at a lot lower cost. So while I don't disagree with making sure the dollars are spent effectively and efficiently, I believe that we do that through state guidelines, through the process of bidding. But more importantly to that, I believe that elected officials should make policy and tax decisions and not appointed boards because elected officials are at least accountable at the ballot.
The audit committee is made up of 9 members, 6 are civilian, and they audit twice a year, basically minimum twice a year. I think that when it comes to allocating funds and setting priorities, that is the respective board or the city. And if Umatilla deeded a community building, then God bless them, they made the decision. That's where, in our case, we spent 2.5 months prioritizing the needs for our capital plan. So our staff and the board should be the one deciding where the money's spent.
Quite frankly, I think that the total amount of the sales tax next 15 years can be like 800 million, a little shy. It's a big number. And quite honestly, I believe elected officials should be over it. An elected board instead of an appointed board. We should have an elected penny sales tax board to make sure they're allocating the funds in the proper area. See, that's the dirty little secret. Half of it's supposed to be already spent to roads, and Jimmy Connor and them, the reason why they added so much to the list is because they've been violating what they're supposed to. I think we need to have a separate board, not to determine what projects to do, but to make sure the projects meet the criteria of what the people voted for. Once again, it goes back to trust and giving people blank checks. And I do agree, it should be held accountable to elected officials.
I think one of the proposals that Don here had made before is that be an elected committee. I know when I look at the CFAC committee, which is the Capital Facilities Advisory Committee, and it met just this week, and they were talking about some of the things that they had recommended to the county board 2 or 3 years ago in a study. I mean, they spent a lot of time. Ralph, you were on that committee, and they were ignored. You know, a lot of things. And so then you question about, well, we have another appointed committee, and they're going to be ignored if they did come up with any ideas. And at some point in time, I guess you taxpayers need to elect people that have some principles, as Dan Webster would say, and that will follow through on things that are very useful, and yet keep in mind that there are a lot of people in this county that are skating on thin ice and do not have the revenue to pay even the sales taxes anymore.
Okay. How is the decision made to use penny sales tax funds for projects that are not included in the original list of approved projects, such as when $1,062,000 was spent for voting machines between 2005 and 2008?
That's a great question. Whenever we deal with tax dollars, we have to meet the rules and regulations set forward by the state. In this particular case, the state legislature mandated, if y'all remember the hanging chads issue in 2001, well, legislation that came out of that says, hey, you got to update your voting machines and have a dual system where you can double check it. So we're better than take the money other than the ad valorem taxes to pay for that. So that's what we did, or what the board did at that time to pay for that. And so I think we almost, just based on unfunded mandates that come down from the state, will almost always have to have flexibility in how we do these.
Eustis Heights Elementary, Eustis High School, Leesburg High School, Mount Dora High School, South Lake High School, Tavares High School, and Umatilla High School. Those were the priorities the board set, and they were completed. We will complete the list when you go to it. We will keep our word.
Well, I agree with you on one thing. They may be priorities, but I don't know who's going to get the work. Another part of our position, quite frankly, is we need to start taking care of Lake County. I tell people, when Lake County was on its knees during the worst economic time it's ever seen, I went by the new courthouse as it was being constructed. I saw not one Lake County contractor, not one Lake County worker. And that same day, I was going through Leesburg in a rainstorm and saw a little guy who was in stucco crew, and he was pushing a shopping cart with a suitcase in it, and his wife was carrying a baby going to the homeless shelter. And I said right then, that's the reason why I'm going to start talking and trying to help the people of Lake County. We can't mandate, but we need to start keeping score, and at least 80% of this money ought to be spent here in Lake County. And quite frankly, that's what hasn't been done in the past. That's another reason why we need to change this ordinance.
One problem with government is that they have all these separate funds, and you can spend from this fund, but you can't spend from that fund. So you can only use some funds for capital spending. You can only use some for capital. As a matter of fact, it's another game like this. And so here we have, you mentioned the $1 million for the voting machines. Now that clearly was a surprise that came up to them. And they have what's called reserves for that. Now, I don't know whether this money actually came from the penny sales tax money. It did? Okay, so yeah, and that would be a question is, was that even on the list they promised? Should they have that flexibility to just spend it on whatever they want when they have reserves? And that's the purpose of reserves, is that you build up some money and you keep it aside. And I remember at the time they had pretty healthy reserves. I would like to point out, Bill says, well, we're going to stick with, but
You're done.
He said they were going to stick with their plan, but yet I think he's not planning on running again at the end of this 4 years, so he won't be around to ensure that.
All right, let's move on. After the millage rate on Lake County property owners was increased by 13.8% in 2014, what is the justification for renewing the current penny sales tax for another 15 years?
Well, this is a great one for me to talk about because I voted against that millage rate increase. Really, it's part of a plan so we don't react from year to year. Why are we putting it on the ballot this year? Is because most of the plans for infrastructure are 5 and 10 year plans. And so we have to be able to adjust the budget accordingly, whether this is reapproved or renewed. And so that's the reason we're putting it on the ballot this year. I agree that 13% was too much. I voted against it. And you know, I wasn't on the board in 2005 and 2008. And so I think one of the comments that was made here, input from you as citizens on items like that, I think is still the most effective way that we can move forward.
The Lake County School Board, like all districts, has no control over their funding. It is allocated by the state in millages. The state in 2009 actually reduced from 2 mills to 1.5 mills our capital. And that is part of the dollars that go into infrastructure. So even with that, we still have maintained our AA bond rating, or AAA, it's way up there. And because we have been very conservative. But that adds to more of a demand for this 1 cent, because ultimately something has to make that up. But our millages for school boards has actually gone down.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, a 3-year plan in business in this environment is unheard. Business is working off 6 months and 1 year plans. And I know the county still, and other people like to say 3 and 5 year plans. There's nobody in this room can forecast that. There's no urgency to pass this tax this year. It's a pure vote suppression. Yes, the reason why you want an ordinance that limits it to new roads and student stations and utilities, because if you allow this bunch to use it for anything they want, in 3 years, if this economy collapses, they're going to come out to you with their hands out saying, we don't have money for roads, student stations, and utilities. We need to focus on the priorities, and if we have a windfall, then we can go to the non-priorities that they're pushing.
Much of that, first of all, this question is focused on the county, and the schools aren't involved in this because they didn't raise the taxes 15 or 13.8%. Matter of fact, they have very little control over there, so they do have a different, higher urgency for receiving any kind of tax, including this one. But getting back to the county, I was at the meetings, and the 13.8%, a lot of that was for capital spending. It was money to rebuild several of the buildings that the constitutional officers are in. And so when they spend all that money, and I'm going to get an earful after this meeting, I can already tell. We ought to allow rebuttal from some of the audience. That threw me off. So I'm going to say that much was one-off capital spending, in my opinion. And then once they've spent that money on those repairs, they're keeping the taxes at the high level and they're raking in more cash.
Okay, this question can actually apply to all the panelists. Do you agree that existing penny sales tax revenue actually encourages government spending by reducing the need for further scrutiny of current budgets?
I actually find just the opposite. I believe that the use of the penny sales tax for infrastructure has to be scrutinized even more than, because it does affect the operational budget. The operational budget is where we run the whole operations. That's how the deputies get paid, that's how ambulance get paid. And so, at least from Tim Sullivan's perspective, when we do a capital project, I want to know what's the cost of maintaining that capital project as we go forward, because that will affect our operational budget, which affects ad valorem taxes, which I believe that we have to maintain a great track structure in order to grow economically. So I would tell you that I think it does just the opposite of that.
Don and I share in that we're both in the private sector, and he's right. You budget 6 months ahead and the economy changes, you don't get a sale and it changes your life. That's not how government works. In Lake County, we introduced 2 years ago what's called Engage LCS. It is now part of the culture. It actually plans 5 years out. It allocates resources. We pledged to put $30 million back in the classroom over 3 years. We met it year 1 in the budget. We just voted on it again and met it again. We will do it again because it's now part of our culture of planning and scrutinizing and looking at budgets and looking at expenses. And this revenue affects capital, and we have very specific needs, and we will accomplish those with your help.
Well, I think if you look at the long list of items that they put that the penny sales tax could be used for, the penny sales tax is encouraging mischief when it comes to being economically fiscally responsible. I do not agree with that. And once again, me and everyone else says we're not opposed to the penny sales tax. We're saying it needs to be governed and narrowed and not giving us blank checks. And that's why we're saying you need to vote no. I've heard this argument about Lake County schools and not getting the proper funding from the state. And I'm going to say something out loud that I probably shouldn't. We need to find better representation in the state to bring home the bacon. If we're 65th in the state or 66th, we need to push our representatives to bring home the bacon, because we're missing the boat somewhere. And that's not a criticism of our representations, but if that's the problem, that's where we need to get our money back from the state.
Bill Mathias for state senate. Send him up there, he'll fix it. All right, you talk about the current budgets and the penny sales tax revenue. One of the many emotional sounding issues that they want to spend money on is vehicles for public safety. That includes the EMS, the fire department, and the sheriff. Now, I'm going to repeat a mantra that I've said, is that the sheriff has a budget of over $60 million. There's hardly any oversight on it. There's no performance audits, there's no public hearings, there's no requirement for publishing the detailed budget on his website for the last 3 years so you can see where the money went. And I have questioned why the board here should get any money at all and give it to the sheriff when he won't provide any of that information. Now, it isn't just the sheriff, it's all constitutional officers. It's a real breakdown in oversight in the Florida state level, and that's one of the reasons why I would not vote yes on this.
Okay, we up to our last formal question before we start doing some audience questions. And this is actually, I hope, kind of a fun question. If you could ask another panelist here tonight a question, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Well, I guess I should ask, I'll just be direct. If y'all think this is so important, why don't you two run for a public office then?
Well, that is a good question. First off, I wouldn't last. There's another Donald running for office, and he's about as outspoken as I am, and I doubt he's elected president, and I doubt if I could get elected, but I do a pretty darn good job as a lumberman. You got to realize I'm a humble lumberman, and I'm debating a general and a millionaire. So forgive me, but that's the reason why I won't run for office.
And I'm a retired auditor who did run for office, but then a lady called Leslie Campione got into the campaign and she won. And I'm happy because she's having to do all that work and I can just sit and watch meetings.
Okay, Bill, your turn.
I will say this, that Don and I right now are soldiers in different uniforms, but we normally would solve all the world's problems in a little place called Steve's. And so I respect both Don and Vance. And as homespun as you are and as eloquent as you speak, when you first spoke about this side of the table being politicians, I am confused that you would want another elected board so you'd have other politicians to blog about.
Yeah, quite honestly, the politicians that do the best are the ones that have very narrow focus. And somebody probably boring and sort of financially savvy and a wonk would run for something like that. So who would really run for a penny sales tax board? But you know, these guys, you know, I have a CFO in our company, and this is the person that comes tells us, you know, Don, we're 2% higher on this, we need to make adjustments on that. So I think if we have people narrowly focused, being a watchdog, looking over this money, we're far better off doing that.
Okay, Don, what question would you ask?
Tim Sullivan, if you had $300 million, would you trust Jimmy Connor?
Obviously, based on my vote to vote against the 13.8% millage rate, the answer to that question would be, of course not.
Okay, and Vance, what would you ask?
Bill Mathias, are you going to run for Senate so that you can fix things at the state level?
Yeah, no, I've had almost as much of this fun as I can stand.
Okay, now we'll get into some audience questions. Andy, you want to put the microphone up here? Well, no, if you want to ask a question, just come up and line up here in the front and speak into the microphone. And remember, just ask a question. Don't go on and on and on in any kind of long statements.
Not Patricia, she knows too much.
Questions are free, comments are $20.
Looks like we have Patricia Sullivan, our
If you're on my
state
side,
committee.
I'll give you the 20.
Go ahead, Patricia.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote it down for ease. Commissioner Sullivan, you stated that in speaking about the Lake County Board of County Commissioners, there is no plan to create new debt. And Board Member Mathias, in referring to pay-as-you-go, you stated that's the strategy of the current board. And in talking about our elected officials, you stated, quote, you elected them. And speaking of doing projects just on the list, you stated, we will keep our word, referring to the school board. And since we know many here campaigned for Commissioner Jimmy Connor, who represented himself as the taxpayer's friend, but once elected to the chair, raised our property taxes 13.8%. I ask, what is the danger of putting boundaries on how the tax will be used and voting in March instead of spending over $400,000 to hold a special election this November? Wouldn't it be refreshing in a county with a huge leadership vacuum to have elected officials like yourselves take a stand and champion fairness and accountability?
Well, I'll stay away from the Jimmy Connor point of that, but I think it's important to get this on the ballot immediately. If, for instance, 14 of our municipalities, we have 14 municipalities. 1/3 of this penny goes to them. There are 9 municipal elections going on in November, so so that's a big part of it. And secondly, I think from a planning point of view, which is my background, I think that we have to go early in order to make sure that we can affect the budgets, positive or negative, as we move forward. And so I think it's November. But I believe that the numbers are very accurate of what we intend to do with the money. And I think that's why I would vote against any bonding of the money, because that would further tie our hands into specific projects.
Okay, who wants to come up next?
Do I get to respond or not?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, because it was to both of us, right? Yeah. I think that more important than really even this penny sales tax is your school board has a $555 million budget. You need to be looking at who that leader is, who do you trust, who do you want to lead? And when all the stars align, then they are going to be fiscally responsible. And there is no way that if anyone looks back on the experience of bonding debt at $32 million a year, that when the economy turned down and when the impact fees stopped, it dried up our resources. No one, again, would follow that path. And this room, should make sure of that.
Hey, go ahead, Ralph.
Okay, I've got 3 or 4 questions. I don't want to get them all out because I want other people to have a chance. But the one that really hit me tonight, and I think, Don, you made a reasonable request. I had not even thought about that. Talked about getting the Attorney General's opinion. What is the problem in doing that? As far as I understand, it doesn't cost you nothing. As an elected official, either one of you could do that. Is that correct, Don? Did you do the research? Okay. So what is the problem in that? If she says no, then we move on to March or whenever the primary is. What is the problem with that? Why will one of you guys do that? And if not, give me a good reason why you won't.
I've never heard that, but if that would put you in your mind.
Would you be willing to do it?
Yeah, all you gotta do is ask, right?
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So you're going to call Pam Bondi tomorrow and ask her?
Yeah, because we're tight. We're just like that.
I can get you in touch with her.
I'll be glad to follow through with that. My experience working with the state's attorney is it will take them months or years to get you an answer going forward.
Okay, Mike, go ahead.
If somebody will frame how they want, if Don can tell me what he wants me to ask.
Okay.
Because I wasn't listening to half the stuff he said.
I didn't listen to all what you said either. Because I've heard it before. Quite honestly, the problem with the ordinance is they've got 150, 200 items, and if you extrapolate all the words, it could be thousands of projects, and they list other infrastructure / 3 things. And the Attorney General ruled in a case with the City of Flagler County or City of Flagler that a broad statement like that does not represent the will of the people, don't properly inform them. And we've had a couple people look at it and say there's an issue with that. So that's what I can give you the law, I can give you the opinion, I have the opinion of the law, be happy to share it with you.
Okay, Mike, go ahead.
I'd just like to ask the no side of the argument, since particularly Mr. Magruder has said that he's not against the tax, but he doesn't like the details. I would just like to ask, how do you recommend we move forward on the issue?
to be honest with you, as someone who loves freedom, I would vote against the tax, because when Sean Park says in a public meeting, yes, the uneducated voter won't come out in November, and another county commissioner tells one of our members they're doing it because they want the uneducated voter not to participate, that's disgusting. So I would vote against it for that one principal reason. I guess I have a little principle, but we ought to vote it down. We ought to get groups like yourself and say, let's narrow what the priorities are. And we forget to talk about this. If we say put the money on student stations, the money that they were allocating through other resources they can put elsewhere. The money that they were going to allocate through roads, which is none, they were going to put elsewhere. You know, focus on the priorities, make them come back to the people, put proper stipulations in there, and they'll have their money. Once again, the worst thing you can hear from government is, I'm from the government, you can trust me. So I honestly think having stipulations is no problem.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
No, as a former government auditor, it's I'm from the government, I'm here to help you. I agree with Don. Again, as my background in auditing and contracts is that this is imprecise, and that really makes me nervous because that means that people come up with just about any reason to spend this money. And I believe that it should be voted down, and then the county and the city and the cities kind of end up having to follow whatever else is done. But the county and the school board get together, and well, no, that hardly ever works, does it? The county get together, put together wording with a public committee with people who want to have a voice in the wording so that they feel comfortable with it. In my case, I want to see something ironclad that says no bonding. And then they put it on the 2016 ballot.
But I don't think that you can. Dynamics change and situations change. And do you look out 15 years and put those kind of handcuffs on? Because it may be necessary. I mean, again, if those of us that are on the inside and work, that's who you need to elect and make sure that they are making the right decision. But to have it as part of this ironclad done, even though I'm a no debt guy, I wouldn't go there to bond to bound those hands of those that we don't know.
I'll be honest with you, if we were discussing issues, non-priority issues, I would agree with you. But putting money towards roads, schools, and utilities, and by the way, the #1 problem in America, they say, is utilities and water treatment plants, I don't think will be a hazard in the next 15 years. And quite frankly, 50% of the money that went to the county the last 15 years was supposed to go to roads and transportation, and that money didn't occur. So I think we need to hold people accountable. And yes, once again, if you trust the politicians, give them a blank check. If you don't, reasonable restrictions are okay.
You want to say something, Tim?
Just, I don't know where you get that we didn't spend the 50% of the sales tax on transportation, because I believe that we did. We get audited by 3 different sources: the Sales Tax Oversight Committee, internal auditors, and state external auditors. On our website, we have put together what we think we'll spend the money on over the next 5 years, and that came at a lot of consternation between 5 commissioners of where we were going to go with that dollar. I don't disagree with you that, you know, flexibility in the world can change, because, you know, in 2001 when 9/11 hit, I never thought 10 days later I'd be on active duty and shipped overseas, but that's the way it works. So I think you have to have some flexibility, and I agree that you have to trust those of us you elect to public office to make sure we carry through.
All right, Pam, go ahead.
I don't know if I can get up this high. Okay, thank you. Tim, I didn't understand your answer to Patricia's question about the special election. It's $400,000. That's close to $250,000. I mean, $500,000. It's a lot of money to me. Our sales taxes were raised. I know that you didn't vote for it, but they were raised. I sat through those sessions, and I listened to a lot of people little old ladies who are living in trailers complaining about the fact that this was really going to hurt them. We're looking at from November to March. That's December, January, February, March, 4 months. Why would the commission decide to have a special election for 4 months when this isn't even going to become due until January 1st, 2018? I mean, I can't believe you can't plan in that kind of time.
Well, the issue is it is a part of 5-year plan, so we're down to a 2-year plan. That was the most effective time in order to give us time to react. And secondly, it's not a total special election done on a different date. There are 9 municipality elections going on at that specific date. So the county pays for every election that we do. And so while I can't disagree that's $400,000, everything that flows through the supervisor of elections office, we pay for it.
And I want to add just 1 second. Speaking of the 1 cent and what the impact is, and there's no one here from the League of Cities, but oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, Peter, you could agree or not agree. Government politicians, whether you pass the 1 cent or not, they have needs. We all have needs for the quality of life. The difference is between your school board and the county commission at a 13.8, which I didn't agree with either, is they can raise the ad valorem again. The cities can raise their ad valorem again. So you are looking at, and am I not correct, Peter, it's 2% that y'all are looking at if the 1 cent doesn't pass?
Yes.
Or 2 mills, I'm sorry, 2 mills.
Right. What it's going to do to a small city such as ours in utility, and it's broadly based on what your budget is. It'll possibly be 2 points on my ad valorem, which are now at 7.2. On state statutes, you can only go up to 10. So you can see if you don't get this 1 penny tax, and I can't advocate for or against, as an elected official, I get myself in trouble. But I know that it is going to get you somewhere because there are things that need to be done on a citywide basis. And there are 14 municipalities in our county that have to fix the roads and do our infrastructure and those kinds of things. And I agree, you know, our money isn't coming back the way I feel it should either from Tallahassee. And I've had some late night debates with our elected officials there. And I don't stay up that late, so it's kind of difficult for me, but I do argue with them. But it will have an effect on us one way or another, and so, you know, I know that you all will make the right decision.
So the consumptive tax is the fair tax. When we speak about our elderly, they will bear the burden on their property taxes. This is a fair tax.
Okay, and with that,
may I respond?
Sure.
First off, I want to say that I appreciate your question a lot, because the one thing that you've said that's very important, you talked about the little old lady in the trailer park. See, all you've heard tonight is what government needs. No one's talked about the poor folks that are struggling. In Leesburg, I went to their meeting when they were contemplating raising the fire assessment fee to $85, and there was black, white, poor, rich, everyone's in there. And you know what? The citizens are tapped out. So quite frankly, we need to be talking about the people's needs and less about what government needs. And quite frankly, no one's saying no to the penny sales tax, but let's put some restrictions and not give Jimmy Connor a blank check. I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that's a fair thing to do. But can you hear how much they're fighting to have restrictions on it and not have a blank check? That should answer your question right there, why this needs to be voted down.
Okay, here's what we'll do. Marie, ask your question, and Mark, you can ask yours, and then we'll go to the closing statement.
Norm's been sitting here waiting.
Well, I mean, we can ask more questions if y'all want. I just didn't want everybody to be here too late. So if the audience wants to ask some more questions, is that okay with the people in the audience? Yeah. Okay. Is it okay with the panel? Answer if you want. No?
Okay, the question that I have is this business of quality of life. I don't like the wording of that, and it's so vague. Isn't there a way that we can define this? Because it's in the eye of the beholder. I mean, a bike path is no quality of life for me. It just makes it more difficult for me to drive my car down the road. And we have a lot of parks now, and I don't know where we need them or if we need them. So I'm really concerned about the quality of life. That opens it up to any project you want to do.
And pickleball court. We really need a pickleball court.
Well, I would tell you, based on the response that I get from constituents, they want those pickleball courts, they want projects, and they want parks, they want, and it's amazing. And I think that one of the things that the penny sales tax, it does restrict what monies we have come in to do that, because it makes us scrutinize the budget very, very carefully as it comes in. And so for all of you, and I don't disagree with you, I would just say that there's also the other side of the coin from people who believe that it's important for the quality of life, and that's everything from parks and recreation, etc.
You know, it seems if pickleball was that important to people, these two businessmen would have pickleball courts available and make money on it.
Okay, quickly, Norm.
Wait a minute, you know better than that. No, I feel like my objection is very much at all levels of government, and I'm not directing it here just to the county or just to yours, but I feel like that we're not getting what we pay for a lot of times. And if my tax money was better respected, more carefully spent, I would be more than willing to give more, as Don said. It's not the objection to pay this tax right now, but I would like to feel like my tax dollars were a little better respected. I think, for example, I could talk about the county, I could talk about the school board. Well, first of all, in education, if money was the problem, the issue, we would have a gold-plated result, and we're not getting the result in proportion to what we're spending. So that's one thing, and I feel the same way about the county commission. I don't think we'll get the
Question.
give me a better result for what we're already spending, and then we'll do more.
We're talking about the 1 cent norm, and we're talking about it for capital needs. And I would challenge you, because you're a critical thinker, go walk the halls of Leesburg High School and see if the money was well spent. Go walk the halls at Eustis Heights. This is what the 1 cent is for capital. So go and walk the list of what we completed and say, did I get a return on that investment? If the answer is no, then don't vote for it. If you walk away like I have and the answer is yes, you have to vote for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm in the construction industry. I go to the little dark rooms where deals are cut, and you didn't get what you paid for at the schools. There have been $1 million worth of lawsuits filed because of overpayment. There's foundation meetings in which the big general contractors, not from Lake County, but from outside the county, are meeting, and you wouldn't attend one of the meetings, and you stopped them. But a lot of things were done, and there's a lot of people in Tallahassee, a lot of people in Alachua County got wealthy off this county, and I know that for sure. So you did not get what you paid for, and once again, that's the reason why we need accountability on it.
Okay, go ahead.
Stand up.
Actually, I think my question is for the county. The school board I'm satisfied with, and the cities I don't know anything about. But as I have been following this evening, we mentioned that we have a fee for fire, we have a fee for ambulance, and I know we have all these MSTUs. I know we have an MSTU for parks, roads, and something else out in the county. There's about 4 MSTUs that we're paying for, right, Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
And although you voted against the tax increase, you did make the motion to increase the MSTUs, as I recall.
That's correct, because MSTUs are municipal servicing taxing units.
Absolutely.
So you know, if you raise the taxes there, you know exactly where the money is going.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
So in order to prevent raising more of those taxes, we do use penny sales tax dollars to provide some of the capital needs for those MSTUs, which is fire and libraries, et cetera, in order to not raise ad valorem tax, because an MSTU is still an ad valorem tax, so that you as a homeowner pay.
Okay, we're paying for the fire, so we don't need those fire trucks. We're paying for that. We're paying for ambulance. We've got a separate MSTU for our ambulance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So what are, and the sheriff has his own budget. He's always bought his own cars in the past. So what are we
He doesn't
raising?
buy that money flows through the county.
He has his budget, and that goes into his budget.
Well, and I understand that, and that's the dollars that we spend all flows through the county. And you make a good point, is everything flows through the county because we're the guys that get held accountable for all the taxes that come in. So when your constitutional officers want to build an office building somewhere down wherever, that all flows through the county. And so
I understand how it works.
I understand how it works. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that this penny sales tax helps keep those at a lower level than we might be able to do otherwise. Because we have 315,000 people in 1,162 square miles, and they want fire services, they want ambulance service.
But we're paying for that. That's just what I said.
I understand, but what I'm telling you is...
Oh, we need that penny sales tax to subsidize. Is that what you're trying to say?
Not subsidize, but keep it out of the ad valorem tax, because 30% of this tax is paid by people who use all those services, but don't live in the county and don't pay ad valorem tax.
But don't live in the county, and say that
well,
again?
Yeah. The penny sales tax is paid by anybody that goes through the county.
Okay.
So because of that, and it's a consumptive tax, so it is probably as fair as you can get. I mean, I know some of the municipalities are raising the fire assessment fee as opposed to raising their ad valorem taxes. And I don't think that's the right way to do it.
I still don't know why you need a third of this, however many millions.
I'll be glad to sit down with you and go through the budget.
Of course, it's not going to bother me that much. The age I am, I'm not going to be paying until the end.
I understand, but you bring up a good point, and the whole taxing structure is what I, as a county commissioner, have to live within. And this is just one of the ways.
Actually, the ad valorem is going to bother me more than the sales tax.
Absolutely.
Because I'm not that big a consumer.
And that's why.
But I followed that budget, Commissioner Sullivan, and I know exactly how those MSTUs work. And I've seen you take money, the county takes money from that, there's three things in that one MSTU. Roads, what is it, roads out in the county, that MSTU. Right. Well, I see them take money and they move that around and do whatever they want to with it. And that was not what it was originated for.
We need to move on.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'd like to say one thing. Ms. Boehner is absolutely right. We pay a ad valorem tax. We have a fire MSTU, ambulance MSTU, stormwater. We pay a debt service on environmental lands we bought. We pay the state ad valorem tax to schools, plus they have the local option. Plus, did you know they already get a % of the sales tax back to the local? But then they talk about growth paying for itself. We pay a fire impact fee. We pay a transportation impact fee. We pay a school impact fee. We pay a parks impact fee, if I didn't say it. And all these impact fees, we're the highest in the region and one of the highest in the state of Florida. So it's sort of odd for me to hear politicians talk about fair taxing when they're getting all these taxes.
Okay, Mark, the shortened version.
Apparently I have a reputation. Well, first of all, thank you, all of you, the panelists, for being here tonight. I know for myself it's been quite educational. One of the questions that I'm left with is I understand the tendency to move toward a 5-year cycle for budgeting purposes. What is the impediment from making any renewal as one of the conditions a 5-year window for the tax to be imposed, and then come back in 5 years and do it again. Because one of the biggest concerns, I think, from a taxpayer's point of view that we have is the lack of scrutiny given the large window of time that is allowed. So there's no reason to be concerned about going back to the taxpayer 4 years from now and ask for them to renew it, because their memories, they're not going to be bothered with it for 14 years before you come back. So what is the impediment, if any, that would prevent that, and why would you oppose that for this measure today?
Great question. I know that we're following what the state law allows us to do. And that's a great question. Why not do it in 5-year increments? And, mainly because it's infrastructure, and so you try to plan out, is my guess. And that's an educated guess based on what I've done both as a registered investment advisor and a general in the United States Army. So the best thing that we could do, but that's also why on the projections that we made, we only used the first 5 years, so that we could tolerate the ups and downs of the economy, because that was one of the biggest things that came out of the internal audit, is we had things on the project list that never got funded. Well, they projected the revenues were going to come in at 7 or 8% growth rate, and anybody that knows the rule of 72, that's going to double in 10 years, and obviously that did not happen.
Time.
Okay.
Mr. Magruder, as a teacher in Lake County schools for the past 4 years, I have seen many improvements. If we voted no on the proposed sales tax, where would you propose that we get the funding to continue improving our schools? Because we still have a very long way to go.
Understand, I'm not saying vote no permanently on the tax. I'm all in favor of giving the school their third. And quite frankly, there's some discussion it should be a half. Hey, I'm not opposed to that. I'm opposed, though, them not saying it's for new student stations. I'm opposed from putting bond issues ahead of time. You would be better off. Bill Mathias and I agree on both one thing. Had they not recklessly spent money in the 2000s, you could be building schools instead of paying interest and debt fees. The problem with the Lake County School District is you don't have people in seats in schools that are over capacity. You only get money from the state from people in seats. And so I support schools. I have a daughter who's a second grade teacher, and I understand the challenge, but we also have to be fiscally responsible. I hear a lot of emotional arguments, but you know what? At the end of the day, we have to be good stewards of the people's money, because until you go through a great recession, you're going to have issues like this. So I think being fiscally responsible, there's nothing wrong with that.
If we never get to the proposed approved wording, what do you propose we do meanwhile? We have a responsibility to our children, our grandchildren, and you even said we can't rely on the state.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm a hardcore conservative. I don't think we're taxed too low. I think we spend too much, and I think there's money we can allocate funds. There's a lot of things. You're looking at someone who's been a magician in business, trying to make things happen. If it can happen, you can make things happen, despite whatever comes up. Who's to say tomorrow the economy of the world won't collapse? If this commodity play that's happening in the world, that's a serious deflationary thing. We could be in the depression in 2 years.
If we skimp on our children's education, the economy probably will collapse.
Well, it's going to collapse without us. We're sort of so much in debt. And quite honestly, my good friends at the school board, I compare them to Greece. They're eating up the debt.
But we won't be. In 2017, the majority of the debt is retired because it was tied to the sales tax. We will be on a trajectory of meeting our capital needs, meeting our debt, and improving our schools. As pay-as-you-go, by 2031, we will be out of debt we will have $19 million in the bank, and our entire list will have been accomplished. That's where we are, folks. And I will tell you, if you blink, it's 2031. And I've heard over and over again about the language and the $400,000. And I just want to say this about that I didn't know it was going to be 400,000, just being fair, but that's 0.006 of the $680 million that we'll bring in over or 800 million, whatever you said it was. And if we're just upset about the light, I mean, it's on the ballot, just for the record, so I don't even know why we keep talking about it. We'll do the Bondi thing, get her to check that out. But if you're saying you're only upset about the language, but you know we have the needs, are we being a little pissy that it's just language and you shouldn't go ahead and vote for it? I'm just saying.
I'd like to respond to that real quickly, is that if, I think the idea with both Don and myself is that they go back to the boards and they review this, they add some terms that put in some of the restrictions we're talking about, and then put it on a future ballot. This thing doesn't run out of money until January 1, 2018. And that also there is a ability, and they have talked about it, so Bill could probably talk more about it, that the schools themselves have the capability of going out for a half penny sales tax, and they decided not to, and instead go for this third split.
Yeah, and let me speak about that, because initially I was in favor of our school district going out for the half. But we have a moment in time where municipalities, the county, and the school board all come together for one purpose, the citizens of Lake County. And for us to pull out on our own, I thought it would be disrespectful to that. And it's been proven that we now are working closer together with our county commission. We have very tight bonds now with the school board and our cities, and that needs to continue to grow. And part of it is that we're united in the same effort.
The only thing Bill says, well, are we getting a little pissy because of the language? We want the money. We don't want your hands coming out in 2 years for 13.8% more ad valorem tax. As a business person, we talk about other hurts. We have 260 people that depend on the job and their livelihood. And between local government, state government, federal government, Obamacare, the pockets of the businesses are being picked. People don't understand why wages aren't going up. It's because we're paying 13.8% more tax every year. We're paying higher impact fees that are unnecessary. So, yes, the reason why I'm here today, people who can lead need to lead. And those who are worried about the poor retired person in the trailer or the young man walking down the road in the rain going to a homeless shelter, they need to lead and start saying no to the politicians. We have no choice.
As sure as I'm sitting here, the counties will raise ad valorem if the penny doesn't pass. The cities will raise their ad valorem. Everyone you're trying to protect will be hurt, and especially the children of Lake County, because there is no other revenue source. So that's what we're down to. And if that's being a politician, then so be it.
This will be the last question round, so maybe.
Oh, darn. Okay.
Yeah, because we got to get to their closing statements.
Okay. Two things. Number one, the timing of it's already been mentioned about being in November versus in March, which would have been 4.5 months later approximately. The reality is, as far as planning, it isn't effective 4.5 months. It'd be effective maybe 3 months at the most, because you guys all know good and well, between Thanksgiving and after as kids go back to school in January, there ain't going to be crap getting done around any of the governmental offices, okay? That's pretty much a given. I don't think anybody disagree with that, even you guys. Last but not least, I honestly, based on the county commission's decision last September 23rd, wish this, I'd be more in favor of it, and I may still be in favor of it anyway, but I'd be more in favor of it if the school board and the cities were getting 0.5% as opposed to the county getting any of it. Because the county got theirs. They got their 13.8%, all right? And I'm not talking to the two commissioners here tonight because they were on the right side of the thing. But the majority of them did. And I want to make one other mention. There's a common denominator between the last 15 years and all the debt that was bought that comes up to today. You've had 3 people who've been entrenched, and somebody made, I think, Bill, you made the point about we got a chance to elect new people. We got 3 people who are career politicians, have been sitting on the school board and the county commission for 15 years, that whole time. Commissioner Connor, Commissioner Cadwell, and the school board member Stiver. Nice people, But bottom line, you want to know where the problem is, you might look in that direction somewhat. All right? And last but not least, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have made a comment. Should I?
Is there a question in there?
Yeah. In keeping with a little bit of integrity, and I want to say this mainly to the two commissioners that are here tonight. We talked about broad-based taxes and where a sales tax is better than ad valorem tax. You guys have had on your plate an opportunity for, I don't know how long, a decade, maybe more, to do a 5-cent gas tax. Okay? That's a user tax. That means guys that drive more spend more, those who drive less spend less. You haven't done that. So if you're going to use that argument, I think it's a little bit intellectually dishonest to do that. You know, use the right argument. We need the money. We don't want to raise ad valorem taxes. I get that. But saying that we think it should be a user tax, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but I thought this was supposed to be a period of questions, not people getting up there and burning
Well,
up the time.
yes, we did say just ask a question, dude. But anyhow, all that aside, we'll go ahead and go into closing statements now, and we'll just start with Tim and work our way down like we've been doing. 2 minutes, closing statement.
Well, I will reiterate what I said during my opening statement. The renewal of this penny sales tax is an important part of how the county commissioners meets its statutory obligations. It is shared by everyone who uses our infrastructure, our roads, our parks, our libraries, our public safety personnel, and 30% of that comes from non-residents who use all those facilities that I just talked about. While at the same time, it does affect keeping your ad valorem taxes low, because otherwise that's the only other funding source that we have to do some of these things. So it is closest to a fair taxes, I think, that we're empowered by the state to handle. And so I would tell you that it is a tax that we need to renew. And with your input, I think there have been great suggestions here tonight for things that we need to look at as we go through the process. And some of that is during the budgetary process, you guys stand it up to what you believe in. So thank you for that opportunity, and thanks for the forum in which to talk about.
I'm really grateful. I want to remind everyone one more time, we have the card back here that'll direct you to the website that really will become, and it's going to continue to grow as we get more testimonial from those that have been touched by the 1 cent today, accomplishments, and then what we expect to do. I'm pretty passionate about this because it is the only revenue source we have for capital. And so it's not about personalities. If you don't like this person or that person, this is way bigger than that. And it is, and if you don't like those people that are politicians, then you are active and you vote them out. It's that simple as far as I'm concerned. But I do believe that our school district deserves this vote. I believe that the children of Lake County and economic development depends on it. If we don't have a vibrant school district, we will not attract industry. That's how important it is to us. So I appreciate y'all being here. I hope if we maybe have changed your opinion, if you were against it, I hope you will tell 10 of your friends. If you are a naysayer and a hater, then just keep it to yourself.
Bill gets a little more animated when the gin wears off. First off, thank you very much for listening to me tonight. I'm just an old lumber guy, and I'm not a smart man. These are great people on the side. Let me be honest with you. Bill Mathias told me one time the only revenue he gets for capital is impact fees. Without impact fees, we can't build schools. I heard the same argument today. Heard arguments from both of these folks. They're fine gentlemen, they're fine people, but they've been co-opted by government. Everything's about government. Everything evolves around government, and it's all about government. Folks, it's about you. It's about the little man that's trying to make a living, scratch out a living. People who were raised dirt poor and had nothing, we understand that $5 a week means a lot. And quite frankly, what we're saying, the reason why to vote no on this penny sales tax, not because we're against giving the money, but saying, my God, we really fear huge economic problems. I imagine if I asked for a show of hands, how many are confident that America's economy is going to be great in 4 years? No one would probably raise their hands. And if you believe that, we've got to make sure the politicians put this money towards priorities and not towards wants. And if they do that, they'll get the money. And they may get the money anyway, but you know, I think it's a common sense approach, and I encourage you to tell your friends and others to vote no on it and make them come back to the table and do it right. That's what we're proposing. Thank you very much.
2 minutes.
You can do it.
You can do it, Dan. You can do it.
I recently finished a article on the economy. I interviewed several local business people, including Ralph Smith here, about the economy. And one of the things that was really striking is that, one, there was a predominant idea that we are on thin ice, that it just takes one issue, you know, one crash of the stock market like today is started. China is going through terrible things. And that it will cause some of the economy to slide to a halt. And yet here we're talking about a tax where that they're going to be taking this money and collecting it for 15 years. And there are people that are at the very close edge. I used to work in the ready-mix industry, and probably Don knows that's a very narrow margin industry. You know, you're priced in a cubic yard of cement by 1 penny, and you lose major customers. And so there are a lot of businesses like that here in Lake County, and that 1 penny tax is important. So there needs to be some safeguards. One is, like I said, they really need to, I want to see something signed by every single politician in these agencies and cities that they are not going to bond out any of these expenses, that they are maybe going to consider it a 5-year term like Mark suggested, and that remember that 13.8% property tax. I mean, to me that was just terrible, and I was at those meetings where people, including some here, were making very emotional statements about the effect on their business and their livelihoods and their property, and they are now facing drastically increased costs in Obamacare, as I was told. And then when I interview these people, there's a lot of going on that is chopping money out of people's budgets because of that. So because of that, I think you ought to vote this down until they say they're not going to put it in bond, and that they're be specific about the areas that Don recommended. Thank you.
Okay, let's give all our panelists a hand. Now, before we